Welcome to the Stay Ready Real Estate Podcast, your action plan for real estate success. Here, we stay ready. Staying ready is being mindful of time and actively doing the things on a daily basis so we stay prepared for the opportunities that come our way. Join your host, Emeka, as he dives into the world of real estate investing, interviewing experts and sharing actionable insights. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe today. We would love to know each and every one of you. So please go to ogbonnaequity.com and click Invest with us today so we can figure out how we can get to your investing goals.
All right, Nico, this is what Jay Parsons says. He says, housing construction overall is down 10% from the peak, and multifamily is down even more. He also states that apartment starts are plummeting to 11-year lows. Multifamily completions are outpacing the starts by 120,000 units since 1975. So moral of the story is he's saying that there's more completions than new builds, especially in the multifamily. And I mean, I'm in Lakeland. I've been telling everybody that, there's a boom here, there's a lot of supply. But according to the statistics, still a shortage. How do you and your economy background, how do you feel about that? And what do you think that means in the multifamily space?
Well, I don't know. It's a great question. I mean, I think that the more units that are online, the more people we're competing against, right? So like I love to see new developments nearby because it's showing that there's an interest in the area. So it's great to have new builds, but then we're competing against them to a degree, right? If it's an A-class building, we're C-class. We're not commanding those same rents. But we found some A-class buildings had lower rents, that they were kind of like using subsidized housing or whatever it was. We had some programs that they could charge less rents than our C-class properties. And we kind of lost out, I guess, a little bit to them. But overall, if if people are saying that supply is low now, I'm sorry, supply is higher now than new permits to build, that means absorption is going to happen in the next year or two, right? So once they start building again, once people start pulling those permits again, it takes 2 years for those buildings to come to fruition. So there's going to be a gap of, yes, there's a lot of supply right now. In 2 years, when by the time, like if people start pulling permits now because the interest rates are going down, it might take 2 years. So everything should be absorbed by then. And maybe there's actually going to be a shortage in our area. I'm not sure if I fully understood that question, but that's my answer to what's going on today.
No, for sure. We see all the supply. The first thing that comes to mind is that's our competition. They're gonna take some of our tenants because the more supply, the more the A class are competing with each other, and then, they have to lower the rents and it just continues to trickle down. But according to this, it's basically saying that, the population growth supports it. And not only does it support it, we need more people to build. But does that build a threat to, value add? Because now people are going to see this. Now the interest rates are dropping. The Fed just mentioned that. Do you think that Fed saying that the interest rates are going to drop, we're going to see, an influx of new development? And you think that's going to affect, the value add C class, B class even more?
I think historically it should be its own class and it should not affect what we can charge. I mean, we're always going, if we're doing C class properties, we're there for a reason. We're there to provide somebody with a little bit more of an affordable solution to what they're looking for. Whereas A class residents, they want what they want, and maybe, our residents are not going to be able to afford that or don't necessarily care for the same amenities. So I don't feel like we're competing against them unless, so let me backtrack a little bit. I'm hearing everywhere that there is a supply shortage, right? There's not enough housing for people, and you're hearing it too. But what we saw recently was a rise in vacancy. So my thought process is, well, what's causing that? What's causing, if we are truly having a supply shortage today and there is a rise in vacancy, something's going on. My interpretation from talking to mentors and people in our network is that people are moving back home, people are roommating together. So whereas it was a cultural thing saying, hey, and a lifestyle choice to just go find your own apartment and kind of live alone, now people are choosing by need or necessity to kind of buddy up. And once the economy, this is obviously just my outlook, once the economy is a little bit more stable and people are not losing jobs, because people are losing jobs, once that kind of turns around, people will be looking again for that lifestyle that we have that we have built into our culture, that you're going to have your own space, your own apartment. You're going to be living, in the biggest apartment that you can afford with the best amenities. And I think that that is one factor why vacancy is up, you know, but I think that is all in time. Things are going to get a lot better. So I don't know.
It, I love it just because whenever you're looking at, not only the news, but actual, data graphs of, factual information when it comes to the statistics of, affordability, average home prices going up, interest rates, the list goes on and on. And I think sometimes I, put myself in a little rabbit hole because like what statistics should I really focus on how it's going to affect me and the things that we want to do. I one thing that I do like to see is like housing affordability, because if you can't afford to buy a house, you have one other option or you have a couple options, but it's either rent or move in with somebody who is renting or they own the house. But regardless, you're going to want to buy your own house eventually. And if the wages aren't increasing, according to like what the inflation is, and this is just me spitballing at this point, I, I find I find it that people are going to buy a house a lot later on in life. So what they're going to do is either save and rent for multiple years until they can afford it, or just continue to buddy up with somebody like you were mentioning. So
Yeah,
do you look at, wages, inflation, as well as the affordability? Because I saw a statistic the other day saying that 1 in 10 homes are worth $1 million. And quite frankly, I mean, I don't think I can afford a $1 million home for at least a decade. But do you think that's gonna, be a benefit for us as these home prices continue to rise?
definitely. Right. What's Ken McElroy, he calls it the renter nation. And we are becoming more of a renter nation. It used to be in like a 60-40 split of renters to owners, meaning 40% were renters. Now I think it's flip flopped recently. It's where it's 60% of people are renting and 40% are owners. He talks a lot about Ronald Reagan bringing in like every American is going to own a home, and they created a lot of programs to help people own homes. They might have to bring something back if that's what the goal is. However, I don't know if that's what the goal or ultimate objective is of the government. And the reality is today that most people just can't afford to buy a home. Home prices are certainly going up, and wages are not necessarily keeping up with inflation. And on top of that, people are riddled with debt. They got student loan debt, they have credit card debt, which is at an all-time high, I believe, now. And to get into a home, starter home, it's an issue. So a lot of people are talking about kind of building smaller, like tiny homes as starter homes now. Because when I was growing up, there were starter homes. There were these small little bungalows where I lived. Those are all gone now because after Hurricane Sandy, they were wiped out. Now we have all these giant houses that were rebuilt on top of them. So there are no starter homes where I live, and I bet you the average median price per home is at least 800,000 here. So how can people afford that? Right. People typically can't afford to buy a home right now, and they're stuck renting. So it is our job to provide the best, you know, apartments for those people.
No, I love that. And the reason why I even like bringing this up is just because multifamily is not going anywhere. I think since 2020, COVID happened, the interest rates dropped. That 3 years, 2020 to 2023, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you name it. Everyone was all about multifamily. Let's do syndications. Let's get into it. And whenever the interest rates hiked, I think that exposed a lot of people to some more hard realities of multifamily. It's a little bit tougher now, right? People aren't talking as nicely about multifamily, or they aren't as excited.
Right.
And I would say this is where, we step in. And here in Florida, we've made offers. We've got deals coming across our plate, and people are still buying deals. It's really hard for us to get in deals. Do you think, at least here in Florida, that that's going to change at all?
I think that it's twofold. Like if they can hold, they will. If they're forced to sell, meaning their interest rates are too high and maybe they're negative, they're not able to pay their debt, then they would sell. I haven't seen. I've definitely seen price decreases, cap rate decompression. So prices have gone down for sure, without a doubt. Still not significant enough to make it a deal cash flow for us the way we want it to, but prices have certainly gone down. So you can just imagine historically, let's say we buy today at asking, it's going to go up because the market is very strong down there. It's just we're currently sitting in this down cycle. And back to the point of people, oversupply, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it might not be, right? So you just said 2020 to 2023 is like the lowest interest rates, right? So everybody, let's say there was a lot of development, and that's a great sign. People look for places with high population growth, high wage growth, and that's Lakeland. It's growing extremely fast. So people looked for it. They all started building. Those are now online. Those that product is coming online, but we're in a sort of a recession where that same renter pool is kind of, as we think, or we're hypothesizing, going back home or buddying up together. So that will all get, I am very positive that will all get absorbed in the next couple of years. And then we're going to have another cycle of building come to fruition. And if not, then we're in trouble because, as everybody's saying, the population is growing way too fast, not only births, but also immigration is growing way too fast for the supply to keep up with, apparently. So I think all good things are to come for sure.
Yep, and like I said, as long as the population grows, they need a place to stay. And so what with all the statistics, we have to get our units rented. And how do we do that? I mean, I think we've been showing that you've been great, Facebook Marketplace, working with Mark on all aspects of his property management. What are the best ways that we're seeing that we're getting in units?
Well, so people are always going to be looking, and I'm getting a lot of hits on a couple of our properties, not all of our properties. I get most of our hits actually on the Idlewild property. I don't know why either. I don't know what the algorithm is doing for you versus me and that particular property. I don't really know, but I'm trying different things with different types of images, right? Because visuals are important to people, pricing is important to people, and we kind of found the sweet spot to where if they in like Facebook Marketplace, let's say they're kind of setting their limits at like 1,400, we're going to let it set it below that, like 1,399, just to kind of catch more eyes. That's one thing we do. We're trying different photos, like interior photos versus exterior photos, and we're trying staged photos. So we did like some virtual staging, and those are coming up great as well. However, then we're getting questions. They're like, "Is this furnished?" And I'm saying, "No, it's just kind of virtually staged." But I do get a lot of interaction. I've spoken to hundreds of people at this point, and the issue that I'm finding is people just don't qualify. So that tells me that there are a lot of people out there. If I'm getting 1,000 clicks on one and hundreds of interactions on one post, there's a lot of potential renters out there. They're just not qualifying. So what is that? Perhaps a downturn, perhaps just the area in general. It could be a few things. I am going to, attribute it to the downturn and having people just not have the right jobs or losing jobs. And we've seen it on our properties. It's unfortunate. But so to get more people in, we just have to get more eyes and get more exposure. So I was talking to Mark the other day, and he's out on not just Facebook Marketplace. He's marketing it as well on Zillow, Rent.com, Rentometer, not Rentometer, Apartments.com, and he's got like a slew of other ones that he is marketing everything on. So we're trying to get as much exposure for our property as possible. We're trying to get as many people to go and look at it as possible, and to do that, he's got a very simple method for it. You can click a button and let's say just schedule a self tour most of the times of most days. So you don't even need us to be there. I think that's important because if people can go and see the place, they can kind of get a feel for it. That can truly, kind of push them over the edge to wanting to rent it. And then it comes down to, do they qualify? We are kind of strict with our qualifications because we don't want people to, all this turnover. We don't want delinquencies. So we're a little strict, but we have to be, in my opinion.
I think these are things that we have to do more of. I mean, I can sit here and say I'm not the property manager, I shouldn't do that, but that's not like we're in a downturn right now. So I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get people in. And we're talking about the economy and all of the different statistics. At the end of the day, people like people. And if you have a good product and they like you, I think that's going to be our advantage. And that's one thing Mark kills it with because he got like 4 applications. But with everything we're saying, it's a down cycle. We got to get creative to get people in. What do you think is going to happen within the next 2 years of from what we're seeing now, and then, population growth is still happening? Do you think this is here to stay for a while, or do you think, everything's gonna get back to normal within a year or so?
Okay. I think that with the interest rates going down a little bit now, I think it's going to cause some people to pique their interest again in looking at acquisitions and selling. I think it's going to create a little bit more deal flow and a little bit more transactions happening by the end of this year and into 2025. But I think that might be short lived. I think we're going to have one more year after that of challenges, or it's a market where we're going to keep rents flat, which is fine, right? And a little bit more challenges of, this is just my hypothesis, by the way, a little bit more challenges with getting, with higher vacancy. And then I think a year after that, so basically at the end of 2 years from today, I think that we're going to be in a very different spot. We're going to have made it to the other end where the market's going to be super strong again. There are still a ton of mentor programs out there teaching people to buy this real estate. There's still a lot of eyes on Florida. Florida's number 1, 2, or 3 every year at population growth. I think at the end of 2 years, once NOI is going up, cap rates are going to start decompressing a little bit. I'm sorry, compressing a little bit. Prices are going to go higher. I think we're going to make out excellent on our properties. Maybe we'll refi, maybe we'll sell. I just have the really optimistic outlook for the next 2 years. But the coming 2 years prior is going to be difficult, and you and I are trying to work every angle to ensure that we're doing as best as we can. And for example, recent data from CoStar showed 14% vacancy is what is happening right now in Lakeland, when a couple of years ago it was 4%. However, at our 44 unit, we finished off with like 8% for the year, maybe even a little bit better. Right now we're at 90% occupied as well. On the 10 unit, we have one vacancy. It's just because we don't want to renew them. We're looking for another tenant right now, so that's 90% occupied. And then our 16 unit, we're at like 11 or 12 leases out of the 16, which we had anticipated. Yeah, basically not having any income for 12 months after acquiring the property, which was only in April. So we're still doing well there too.
Are you looking into anything specific that, worries you or keeps you optimistic, or do you just kind of take it day by day? Because there's so much out there. So do you take any of these statistic graphs to heart with anything?
Well, I try to think about the overall picture of what multifamily real estate is, and it's historically has appreciated over time. And if that's the case, if it will continue to appreciate, which we never underwrite that way, but if it will continue to appreciate, and if we are cash flowing today, meaning we can pay all of our expenses today, we can pay our mortgage, we're not at risk of defaulting on our loan, then who cares? We're just sitting through a time that is not very lucrative cash flow wise, and that's okay. None of us are living off of the cash flow of these properties. Even our investors, let's say they have $100,000 invested in a deal. We have an 8% preferred return. It's only like $670 a month that they are necessarily missing out on if we're not paying that full amount. However, we are paying distributions, just not that amount. And that's okay. That's not what somebody's going to live off of, right? So I don't think it's a terrible thing. And if it's a preferred return for our investors, it's still accruing, right? So over time, we're just going to make that up when times change. And again, our properties in particular, we have a minimum of 5 years of fixed rate on it. And I think we're in a great spot. So historically, if multifamily property appreciates and we are not at risk of losing it, we're just kind of waiting it out. That's how I see it.
We're still trying to buy. We're still trying to buy.
Oh yeah.
What's different about your underwriting now? You just said, which is new to me, that the vacancy in Lakeland is 14%. And last time we talked, I believe you were underwriting for 10%. You think you'll still do the 10%? Because I would say we're going to be better than average when it comes to, getting people in.
Yeah, absolutely. I will underwrite for 10%, and then I'll actually even go to 8% for the next year or so, because you'll never win a deal if you're underwriting for 15% vacancy, 14%. There's no way you're going to win a deal. No seller will sell unless there's something really wrong. But at that point, they'll be underwater, because I'm looking at all their debt. When I'm underwriting, I'm seeing what they have left on their debt or what they bought it for. And people are not going to sell unless it is a serious issue. And I haven't ran into any serious issues, and I'm talking to a lot of people. So it is what it is. And again, remember I sent you to that 5 unit the guy. So I keep calling him every once in a while to check in, just because I gave him my offer. It's not what he wants. We all know that, but I'm checking in with him because he's 81 years old. He said he's tired. This is his last property. He had some great ones and he's just looking to get out. He doesn't want to pay taxes or get hit with too many taxes. So we're talking about seller financing. Let's just putting a small percentage down. Anyway, I reached out to him the other day, and he was on the way to a doctor's appointment. So he was like, he couldn't talk. So I followed up today, but he didn't pick up today. I left a message simply checking and saying, hey man, I hope the doctor's appointment went well, that kind of thing. So part of this business is always just fostering relationships with people and trying to make sure that you're top of mind when they are actually going to sell, because I can't afford what they want. We can't afford to pay what they want and actually have the property perform properly. So we got to make sure we're sticking to our guns. And sometimes you never know, like 1 out of 100 deals we might actually win at our price point.
For sure, it's a numbers game. Every no is closer to a yes. And with that, Nico, tell the audience three things that they should be looking at when it comes to buying a deal or what to look for with these statistics that we just went over to help them better determine what they want to do, if it's, buying big multifamily or waiting and buying a smaller multifamily quadplex or something.
I think the number one thing today is based on your underwriting. If you're confident in your underwriting, does the property cash flow? If the property cash flows and you're just getting into a deal at a single or a double, very kind, not a unicorn incredible deal, that is totally acceptable today, especially if you're doing it as a JV or with your own money. I would personally take the risk of what is showing up for me as like a 1.2 to 1.3% equity multiple, as long as it is cash flowing a few percent, 3 to 5% for me, for my investors, 5 to 8%, depending on whether we're going to syndicate it. Now, that's number one. Can it cash flow? You have to make sure it can cash flow. Number two, I would absolutely look harder at the bones of the property. Look at the components that are going to be breaking down because they can be costly over time. For example, ACs, roofs, water heaters. These are things that go, and septic tanks, things that go and that will need to be replaced eventually. So when you're underwriting, make sure you're looking your expenses or your capex with a full 5 to 10 year horizon. So things might be working great right now, but if you have 15-year-old ACs, they will crap out within the next 5 years. You just have to plan for replacing them. That's number two. Number three, I would say stay in the game and just make sure you're top of mind and relevant with all the brokers and the sellers. Make sure that you're constantly contacting them because they are looking for buyers. They need buyers today. They are looking for you and people that they can transact with, because there are a lot of people that pulled out right now and are kind of sitting on the sidelines or struggling with their own deals, and they just don't have the capacity to buy anything right now. So buying is tough, and brokers are feeling the pinch and the pain, and they would love to be communicating with you. And even if it doesn't come to fruition now that you get a deal a few years from now, if the market turns, they will think of you, the person that stuck with them and communicated with them throughout the downturn.
Beautiful. I just want to end on the Warren Buffett quote, right? It says, "Be greedy when those are fearful, and be fearful when those are greedy." And I think this is a perfect, time for that. And I find it very funny when people say it's not a good time to buy, and then whenever it is a quote unquote good time to buy, they want to post a Warren Buffett quote. But this is the time. The people who stay in it, stay consistent. I think consistency and discipline is the number one thing at this point. Those are the ones who win. And you just gave three examples of how to win. So until next time, Nico, we got to do this again.
Oh, you're the best, Emeka. I couldn't agree more, man. We got to be buying now. I agree.